So, with me today is Julie Smithson, co-founder and CEO of Metavrse, an open source 3D creation platform for the spatial web. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me.
So, Julie, I love hearing about people's journeys. And, doing the research, found out you're named one of the top 100 women of the future in 2024. We're going to be talking about the metaverse. But your last formal college degree, and it was 20 plus years ago, I'll give you that, was
Yeah.
in hotel management. So please just share with me how you go from that to being one of the women of the future and the most forward-thinking part of industry.
Sure, sure. Yeah, when you put it like that, it definitely doesn't connect, right? So yeah, I took hotel management and connected with people way back in the day. I got married in 2002 and had two girls, and my husband has always been a entrepreneur and looking for the visionary and things. And it was in 2010 that we actually created the emulator and the emulator for DJs. And it was the world's first touchscreen DJ controller. Uh,
Oh,
Way back before, the tablets were out, anybody was carrying a phone in their pocket or a device in their pocket. So we created touchscreen technology for the music industry back in 2010. And that was the gateway for us that led us on the path to learning more about technology, and introducing us into this futuristic uh, ecosystem where we were then introduced into VR. So that was back in 2014. My husband, Alan, he was invited into a curiosity camp with Google back in the day. And it was because of our work with the emulator DJ controller system that we were invited into this. And so in 2014, he came home and he said, I've discovered where the future is going. We've got to get into this. And so we started working on it. And in 2016, we started our company and called it Metaverse. Little did we know that it was going to be a trend word of the future. But we started building and understanding the technology and made different projects from 360 videos. We started learning about 3D assets and CAD models. We learned about augmented reality and portals and just how all the technology worked. So over the course of, from 2016 onwards, I've built over 200 immersive projects with my teams. We've completed about 12 world firsts. We've won several different awards. And of course, that's led us to where we are today, and having the respect and acknowledgement of being a top 100 women of the future. Is kind of a unique title, but because of my involvement in the ecosystem, the work I've done, I haven't just talked the talk, I've walked it and implemented in not just small little corporations. I've worked with large enterprise companies and won awards like Best Advanced in Education delivered through technology, and Best Retail Awards, Best Immersive Retail Awards for consumer experiences. So I've built my knowledge up over all of this time that I now have this advantage. I know how things work. I know how things will come together. And in 2021, Mark Zuckerberg announced Meta for, the metaverse, and it became the big acronym Metaverse, as some people called it. But we actually, right before the announcement, we actually were awarded the IP on the word metaverse. So I
nice.
actually own the word metaverse, even though it's spelled a little bit differently. I do have the IP trademark over that name.
Very cool. Um, so, Julie, as you're going through that, I mean, you talk about a lot of firsts. You talked about the music industry and DJing specifically, and becoming the first tablet-driven DJ software platform, if you will. How do you how do you see things so differently or so much more advanced than others around you? Because look, as an entrepreneur, that is what I'm trying to help people do for and myself for decades now.
Yeah, yeah. Having the vision to be innovative is really unique, and it's not just me. It's my partner too. We saw this technology back in 2010, the DJ controller, and it was see-through as well. And I'm happy to share more information afterwards on that. But that was hard trying to teach people about touchscreens back in 2010, especially the DJ community who are very tactile and need to
Yes.
have knobs and faders in order to control the music or the lighting and that sort of thing. So, we hit a lot of walls of knowledge, and even today, as you know, things are exponentially growing in paces that we've never imagined before. The information coming at us. So I guess you could say I'm surrounded by some very talented people who also keep my mind sharp with innovation and understanding the different technologies, how they do come together. But the adoption cycle is certainly one that's, not everybody is there for it. You either have somebody who's willing to accept, what could change or what could be different versus somebody who's stuck in the legacy of a process. Today, if you're standing still, you're going to get run over. So that's kind of the mantra of today. If you've got to jump in with 2 feet of, how AI is going to change a workflow or a process, how it's going to change you or it's going to change a team's way of working. And I think it's just introducing a mindset that people will be comfortable with. Sometimes it's starting small, baby steps, but you got to take those steps. You got to start to introduce how innovation could change, and the digital thinking is where it's at.
So, do you have an approach? What I'm thinking of, and for decades, I have moved it on begrudgingly on the computer, and I don't know if I've made the right decision, but I always had a whiteboard with what became hundreds of sticky notes over literally a decade plus. And I would just walk up to it, whether it was for my own businesses or later supporting clients, just to see, was I seeing things clearly? Were the opportunities coming up? Is there something we should pivot on? Is there some way that you archive all those hundreds or thousands of thoughts that we as entrepreneurs have?
I think the key is to be connected to a community where you can continue that connection of learning. There's a lot to learn right now, even for
Yeah.
myself. Call me a top 100 women of the future, but I don't know everything. And things I learned today, I'm learning at the same time you are. The advancements, even over the last couple of weeks, between Microsoft and Google, are are revolutionary. And I'm part of an AI brain juice group, some of the most forward thinking people on this planet who are literally trying AI tools on the daily basis and implementing them, trying to see where the workflow is, what works, what doesn't, what are the warning signs. And, together we're learning. So I don't know if there's an actual, map of how to. I think the key is just to continue learning and be part of these communities where you can bounce ideas off of. You can say, "Hey, I learned this. Have you seen this? What do you think of this?" And try and find people who are very like-minded with yourself. I think that if you're starting fresh with somebody who doesn't understand anything, you really have to find where their base knowledge is and grow from there. And I would like to say that that's kind of one of my key skill sets is being able to explain this futuristic technology in ways that makes it easier for people to understand or relate to. There's so much to do, there's so much to learn and implement, and ecosystems are now changing on the daily. So wherever you can find support for that, just don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. It's not advisable because then you'll get left behind.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I mean, I look back and, I look back at the reality versus hype. And this may be a bad example, but I look back to the beginning of this year with DeepSeek. It's faster, it's this or it's that, but when you crunch down to it, and again, I'm a Luddite in this field, but as you crunch down to it, even on the surface, you start understanding that it was searching strings of words versus an individual word, meaning that if you have 10,000 words, you're not searching all of them. You're actually searching 500 strings or 1,000 strings or whatnot. I don't know if that's better or worse, but it's significantly different than saying it was faster and using less power or energy than North American models. It was just approaching it differently. And we don't really, well, I don't know if it's better or worse. So I guess for the average individual, those headlines are tough.
They are. They are. And I've seen a growth in my work of using ChatGPT and now I'm getting ready to teach myself how to link it into Claude, for example, because the outputs will advance what I want to do. And, you know, to see that implementation on the mainstream right now is still, it's still very far away for the average person to be able to understand that. But these tools are already here, and I think this is the scary part for what's really happening and the speed of things. Because as ChatGPT matures and Claude and DeepSeek and all these different AI tools, they're replacing processes. And in the group chat we had last night of the advancements of what Google has brought out with VO, there must have been dozens of startups that were wiped out just in that release. And this is the change that's happening behind the scenes that nobody really knows about, because they didn't know about those startups in the first place that just started their company maybe 6 months ago and thought they were here for a while. And meanwhile, you have a big conglomerate that comes in and advises a tool that connects with everything else that we use. There's another big announcement that happened in the last couple of weeks, which is, I believe, a very, very big game changer. And if you want to jump into this one a little bit later, but it's around blockchain, because Google added the Web3 wallet to our workspace. And this is something that in a project a couple of years ago was a huge barrier for entry. And Google just wiped that barrier clean the other week by adding it to our workspace. So now blockchain, which will become the validation tool and to build off of AI, because what can we trust right now when we're communicating or exchanging or transacting, or if how do you know I'm not a deep fake in this room? How do we know when I send you a file it's going to get to you? And this is where we're going to start to use blockchain in those interactions. And the fact that Google has announced that they've implemented this Web3 wallet already into our workspaces that we already have, this now takes the whole process of dealing with transactions into a new level, because we don't have to explain to people how to create a wallet. It's already presented for them. So this technology is not slowing down anytime soon. It's ramping up in ways that humanity just doesn't even comprehend at this point.
So are deep fakes really just a new imposter syndrome?
Yes, yes, they are.
Yes.
No,
That is such a great
I
answer, and I just took it in such a flippant direction. I apologize. Um, no, but picking up on what you said, it's got to be tough on people who want to start tech companies, because I have the opportunity to judge a lot of competitions, startup competitions here and in Europe and whatever. And a lot of times the judges get very excited about these applications. And I go, "Ah, it's too obvious." In a sense of somebody's got to be working on this at Google or Apple or Meta or whatever. It's just too obvious, and 100 of their team for a month can probably knock this out of the park. And I don't want to be negative, because I'm a startup person, a startup and build person. But do you get those types of barriers these days? Is that a barrier of thinking that we should put ourselves through a little bit more?
Well, I think there's two pieces to that. First of all, the startup community is struggling right now. The investment sector is just on pause. Let's just put it that way. It's if it's hard because there's so much uncertainty in the world for other reasons, other outside sources, and just where this ecosystem is going, how fast things are going. People shouldn't give up in trying to figure out those solutions. It's just I think that they've got to work through them quicker to figure out if there's a real solution there, not to draw too much resources behind it. I also think we're entering into the gig economy now. This is new for many, and for a graduate coming out of high school, or sorry, university or college, looking for that job. Yeah, it's going to be tough right now because companies are hiring for people to now manage AI bots or AI agents. They're not necessarily hiring them to do the work themselves. So the future talent pipeline needs to really hone in on what they love to do, what they enjoy doing, what their skill sets are, and try and leverage that in ways that someone will see the advantage of having that human who can understand that process. Being hired by somebody versus being a contractor, that's definitely going to be more prevalent to the future of work right now. There's a lot of uncertainty out there because things are scaling so quickly. And so much change and process is being altered in the meantime. I watched a World Economic Forum presentation a couple of months ago, and the future of work for C-levels is now you're managing humans, and you also have an AI team, right? And you have agents and you have bots that the company is now responsible for. And this is the first time that we know of that you actually have that divide of these two different groups of I can't even use the word people, right? Of efforts in the company that are moving towards a goal. Those humans have to know how to work with bots now. And that's a skill set right there,
Right.
and how to report that to the leadership. The leadership needs to understand the impact of those bots and what they're doing to change the company and the output as well. So, the startup world is changing. Businesses, small, medium, enterprise, large, are starting to change in ways that we've never encountered before. So it's really staying on top of all of this technology, staying on top of how humans are changing the way that they're working with this technology as well. And then, of course, how people are managing themselves from a wholesome standpoint. I like to use the term humanics in my
Hmm.
conversations. Humanics is a definition I've used for years, and it's the fact that you and I know you're human, and I'm going to treat you with respect and in our conversations. I also know we're using a platform, Zoom, to record ourselves, to record me, and you may use this data that we are collectively gathering together for other purposes. There's a humanics component in that I know I'm okay with all three of those things. And we need to move humans to be okay with all of those things moving forward. So it's really about balancing that humanics approach to work and life and being a part of all of that ecosystem at the same time.
No, I love that. And I love so one of the areas like say hi to the future, hi is human ingenuity. So clever, inventive, original thinking. But a lot of the work I do, and it's going forward, is just around ingenuity. So we look at human ingenuity and we look at, I'll just call it artificial ingenuity, because I think that that's what's going to come as soon as we can plug quantum into a nuclear power plant or whatever it needs. But I've heard so many people speak to business crowds and C-suite, to your point about artificial intelligence and what it does and what it means. But nobody's speaking about the balance, and it kind of drove me crazy. So I started going there. And I know a lot of people are, but it was a next step evolution because as a CEO, and I've been one for a while, you really need the context. It's great to hear the words. It's great to hear this is what you can do, but do that's different, do that makes it more quick. And I mean, I'm fine with it now. I mean, you know, doing research, writing notes, taking transcript, it's all original material. But someone who in seconds can find the 10 words that are repeating or phrases that are repeating, That's invaluable. Why would, as long as it has a level of accuracy, and of course you go back and check it, but why would somebody not take advantage of that?
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot of people that are really scared about the technology too. I think from a leadership standpoint, discovering what problem you're solving with AI is the baseline, right?
Mhm.
And what data are you using? What pool of clean data are you using to make those decisions for the
Yeah,
company or a process or a workflow that will be impacted by how you will apply AI to it. Personally, I have a chat GPT that I love my chat GPT. I've built it enough that it understands who I am. It understands my personal mission and what I'm working on. I feed it the data that I know is correct, and I'm very careful not to just copy everything into
right,
into ChatGPT and say, find this answer. That's not the way. And the skill of prompt engineering, is one that we're not teaching in schools yet, but we should be. Eventually my chat GPT will just start to understand what I want because I've built it over time. But you can't just approach a chat GPT or any kind of AI and assume that it's going to have the answer for you. You
right,
have to train it. It's like a dog. It's a robot. You need to be able to put the data that you want to have as its baseline knowledge in order for it to give back valuable input or feedback that encircles what you're doing already. So it's not just pick up a chat GPT and run with it or ask it questions. It's more building it out to be your thought partner and not just a robotic extension of you. And it's a very futuristic way of thinking of
right,
it. But,
right.
we are all moving towards having our own agents, our own assistants. School will change so that kids will have their own AI tutors. And this is the big shift in education, that, I foresee and what should really start to happen because education is falling behind in more ways than we can ever imagine. One of my other bigger missions, if I can just drop this in here, I do have a company name called Metavrse, but our bigger mission is around a company called Unlimited Awesome. This started about 12, 13 years ago when we were in the industry of this touch screen, and we understood that with the advancements of technology that were happening and seeing our daughters grow up in school, we knew that the school system was not going to be ready for it, as well as not be ready to support the emotional changes that were going to start to take place. So, Metaverse is based on 6 castles of success. The very first one is perseverance. And I think this is important for everybody. And, the changes are happening so fast. So, how do we as humans remain well and have the mindset to be able to cope with the exponential changes that are taking place? That, I can sit here and have a conversation with you and not be stressed about, what we've just talked about and that sort of thing. So, perseverance includes doing a gratitude journal, recognizing abundance, healthy living, yoga, deep breathing, meditation, all of the things that make us human and, allow us to step into. And the second castle of success is critically thinking. How do you critically think if you don't have the mindset to be able to think, logically about all the things that are happening? So critical thinking, teamwork and collaboration, financial literacy, environmental sustainability. These are the castles of success that
Mhm.
we've put into a program, and we're proud that we're continuing our mission. It will have a virtual campus. It will have badging that's tied to the blockchain. It's a very futuristic, but very relevant today, needed type of education to be able to support the future of humanity and allow anyone who attends the school to know their potential during this stage in AI.
So, Julie, I love the discussion on chat GPTs and quality input, quality output. And I mean, again, when I am using AI right now, The only data that I am using is data that I've generated. It's data from my own research, from my own transcripts. I am not a big believer still, well, especially at the level that we work at, of a chat GPT informing me, of work that I will use to translate to other people. So again, only my own input. But with your own input, I just find, yes, it can reread 10,000 words much more quickly than I can. Julie, we've talked a lot of, about a lot of interesting things so far, and I think the things that people need to understand in general business and about AI, and we've touched a little bit on blockchain. Tell me a little bit more about your company, Metavrse. You work in the XR industry and with the spatial web. So maybe even what is XR? What's a spatial web? And then, why is it
Sure.
important?
Sure. Yeah. So the metaverse is a place where you go when you're an avatar, you're in a 3D world or virtual space, very similar to Roblox or Fortnite, where you're represented as an avatar and you play a game or you're interacting multiplayer, you're with other people. The metaverse is not just a game, it can be applied to real world applications. And when we started our company in 2016, we started working on all different types of applications. As I mentioned before, 360 video, 3D, 3D retail activations using augmented reality. And this is where spatial computing comes in. So spatial computing builds out the metaverse. You're dealing with things that are in a 360-degree perspective. Sometimes it's just 3D on your mobile device, sometimes it's on your desktop, and sometimes you're in a headset. It really depends on the use case itself. One of the projects that I worked on in the last couple of years was, and I should probably just say that all the work that I've been working on has been related to education, training, retail, and collaboration, not gaming in that specific way. So some of the work I did during the lockdown, actually, and it stemmed from COVID, the pandemic, was working with Siemens Healthineers, one of the biggest manufacturers of medical machines. And we took 28 blood machines, which were obviously at a high demand time around the
Mhm.
world. And we took these 28 blood machines, everything from a handheld device to a room scale, with conveyor belts and test tubes and all that. And we converted them into virtual labs for training for the maintenance team to be able to go and fix these units. And in the process of us building out a virtual lab and integrating it with a learning management system, we managed to reduce their training times down from a 2-week in-person training program down to 5 days at home and 5 days at the office in the training center. And the cost reduction, number one, was in the millions. As you can imagine, they don't have multiple of these blood machines around the world. So you're flying people from around the world into Germany for this specific training. They also sped up the training and the retention around the training process, and that also brought these maintenance repair people directly to roles a lot faster. So the impact of immersive learning was something that this was the award that we won, Best Advanced in Education delivered through technology, as a Brandon Hall Award. Being able to put 3D into a learning process. And this was not in VR. I'd just like to just make that statement. It was just 3D on desktop because that's where the people were. Maintenance people weren't prepared to put something on their head and learn that way. They brought the technology to where the people were. And I think that's a really important statement for any leaders that are looking to implement this type of technology, to figure out what are they using right now? And then how do you start to, and I've used this statement a lot, how do you take a step into your technology? And we're dealing now with 3D. So we're dealing with a different access. We've been dealing with XY accesses. And now we're about to deal with the Z axis We're going into our technology now. And so where people are, if they're comfortable on their mobile devices or their desktop computers, and they can interact with their mouse and spin a virtual machine around, look to see where the cables are, where the power is, how to change a fuse. This is what we built for them, was the step-by-step process of interacting with the machine, worth millions and millions of dollars before they actually got to that training center. So the retention, they were like, yeah, I know where that button is. Yeah, I know how to change that, speeding up that entire process. So, this is the metaverse is in general, it starts with 3D. And, as I said, it could start on your phone right up to a 3D headset. The more and more immersed you get, the more you are immersed and you're fully in there, represented as avatars. So Metaverse is a company that we started to learn about all of these projects, and we started project-based, different types of examples. But then we moved into actually having a game engine, and the game engine itself is like the backbone of these other programs like Fortnite and Roblox out there. The game engine itself is what holds all of the pieces together, and that includes all the 3D assets that you would have in a space, the 360-degree environment that you would have, the avatars, how you would interact and transact with all of the things in the space. So the engine is kind of that core piece, and that's what Metaverse is. Metaverse is now an open source game engine. We're working on the creator tool right now, and the creator tool used to be how things were a year ago, very rudimentary. And now we're changing that creator tool because of the AI advancements that we do have. The prompts need to change. We need to change how we're definitely pulling in assets and rotating things out. We're going to be moving to a very API driven ecosystem. From a business perspective, pulling in whether it's loyalty rewards or it's inventory control, as we're starting to introduce more and more of this. So yeah, that's where Metaverse is. Where we've done so many projects, but it's put us in the position of being able to speak about all of these different things and how they will be impacted by real world use cases.
That was pretty cool. And I mean, it adds a monumental layer to our whole hybrid work discussion.
Absolutely.
And so where do you think this plays into the everyday in say
Yeah.
5 years from now?
Yeah, sure. Into the everyday, I think, from a business perspective, businesses will start to have, 3D within their websites, for example. And by the way, the web is the future, not apps.
Mhm.
Um, and that leads to a big conversation about interoperability. Maybe we can have a part two on that one. But that's the future is we'll start to see bits and pieces of companies that'll take 3D and start to add it to their marketing experiences. Brands will start to use 3D and interactions to have gameplay to reward their consumers for following their brand. We'll start to see all metaverses out there for different brands that you would go and visit and claim your reward, grab a coupon, buy their product, try something out. We'll start to see this spatial computing being added to the ways that we interact with brands and companies, but also the way that we're training and we're educating, that we're collaborating, that you and I could meet in world as avatars and have this conversation and have a spatial recording of that. That's happening as we speak, and I'm actually going into an event in 20 minutes to do a 3D recording of an event with our XR Women team, which I think we'll talk about in a second. But all of these things are already happening today. It's not like they'll happen tomorrow. They are happening. It's just how quickly they permeate between with the leadership and how companies will take those steps. And yeah, it's scary. You're changing things. Not everybody's going to like the new processes of the way that things are being done, but technology is changing at a rapid pace. So we have to follow along in some way or another.
Well, Julie, it's been a pleasure, and I know there's so many things left to talk about, You're now at about 18 minutes. I really would like to suggest we follow up with a part two rather
That sounds
than
good.
putting things in. So, Julie Smithson, co-founder and CEO of Metavrse, thank you so much for your time. And I know we all look forward to our next discussion.
Thanks for having me.